As You Like It for iHearShakespeare. Written in 1599 and just before Hamlet, Shakespeare's As You Like It is one of Shakespeare's most self-consciously theatrical plays, as the characters are written with a perceptible awareness that they will be performed by actors. This may at first seem an obvious point. All plays are written with the presupposition that they will be performed by actors for an audience. But As You Like It goes further by commenting on the nature of life as performance, highlighted in Jaques' All the World's a Stage monologue, and performance as life when you consider how Rosalind takes on a masculine identity to protect herself from the aggressions of men. It also features one of Shakespeare's supreme female characters whose only flaw, if you can even call it that, is settling for someone that can hardly be considered worthy of her mind and presumable beauty. As You Like It, set in Duke Frederick's court and in the Forest of Arden, presumably in northern France or southeastern England, provides the terrain upon which Rosalind sows beauty and harmony with her words and actions. Indeed, Rosalind glides self-assuredly through this idyllic world of Arden, free from the restrictions put upon women since she is dressed as, and perceived as, a man. The Forest of Arden is itself a specially created world invented by Shakespeare, not only for the licenses it affords, but also the due number of pieces that go to the construction of its name. First of all, there's the name Arden, which is Shakespeare's mother's maiden name, Mary Arden. Next, and this bit of information must come twofold, and that is that Arcadia was, in European Renaissance terms, a kind of pastoral locale and sort of uncorrupted and harmonious wilderness which Shakespeare would have been familiar with, and that the Garden of Eden, according to the Bible, was the pure terrain in which Adam and Eve were inserted. These two names commingled, Arcadia and Eden, readily evoke the word Arden. And thirdly, which picks up on the idea of the Garden of Eden, and that is that Shakespeare himself is known to have played the role of Adam, the kindly servant who escorts Orlando into the Forest of Arden, and so further substantiates the idea that Shakespeare had in mind the Garden of Eden, or something like that, when he wrote As You Like It. Finally, we also know that there was a forest called Arden in the county of Warwickshire where Shakespeare grew up. It seems no accident, then, that the forest, the context in which Rosalind thrives, is named Arden. Further, Orlando gives the forest a voice by nailing love poems upon the trees of Arden, and so the world becomes that much more vibrant for having these characters within it. As You Like It, then, is Shakespeare's contribution to pastoral stories of his time. And now, let's begin Act 1, Scene 1 of As You Like It for I Hear Shakespeare. Act 1, Scene 1 begins with Orlando, youngest brother of three, which include Oliver and Jaques, complaining to Adam, a servant in the household originally played by Shakespeare himself, that his eldest brother, Oliver, has done him wrong by keeping him homebound, uneducated, and generally disconnected from society and station. Oliver soon enters, and Orlando challenges him only to literally be struck down by the elder. The two brothers have a brief physical fight, finally stopping with Adam being the one most insulted by their behavior. Next, Dennis, another servant to Oliver, enters with the news that a wrestler named Charles, who is in the service of Duke Frederick, has come to speak with Oliver. Charles enters and explains that the news is only old news, which consists of the fact that the old Duke, Duke Senior, has been banished by his younger brother, Duke Frederick, and now lives in the Forest of Arden, free from the bounds of society, as Robin Hood did. He further explains that Duke Senior's daughter, Rosalind, was not banished, but that she lives within the bounds of the land, close-knit with her cousin, Celia. Charles next shares that he has been told that it has been heard that Orlando intends to come and challenge him at wrestling, and that he, Charles, has no choice but to hurt him. Oliver sees an opportunity here to be rid of his youngest brother Orlando, and only encourages Charles to hurt Orlando, to break Orlando's finger, or even break his neck. It would be fine since Orlando deserves it. Cheered by the conversation, Charles exits, confident that he'll win the wrestling match. Scene 2 introduces Rosalind and Celia, whose initial conversation is meant to demonstrate the depth of their connection to each other. Touchstone, a clown, enters and mocks the idea of knightly honor as another comical character named LeBeau enters and shares news that Charles has savagely killed several opponents. Duke Frederick and his train enter, ready to witness the next wrestling match, which is to include Charles and Orlando. Rosalind and Celia, taken by how attractive Orlando is, implore him not to fight. Orlando replies, "Let your fair eyes and gentle wishes go with me to my trial, wherein, if I be foiled, there is but one shamed that was never gracious, if killed, but one dead that is willing to be so." Rosalind is probably very moved by Orlando's words here, but her destiny and his are solidified when he finishes with, "Only in the world I fill up a place, which may be better supplied when I have made it empty." Orlando and Charles fight, and much to the lady's delight, Orlando wins. Duke Frederick quickly comes forward to discover the name of the new winner. When he learns that it is Orlando, and the son of Duke Signor, his elder brother, Duke Frederick refuses to deliver any prize. The Duke and his attendants exit, leaving Celia, Rosalind, and Orlando alone. Rosalind gives Orlando her necklace and then begins to leave. Orlando calls the two women back, but suddenly becomes tongue-tied, and so the women leave again. LeBeau returns in haste to warn Orlando that he is in danger since he has upset Duke Frederick, but Orlando can only ask about Rosalind before making his exit. Scene 3 takes us back to Rosalind, who is admitting her love for Orlando to Celia. Duke Frederick next enters and explains that Rosalind is now banished from the land. Celia states that she shall accompany Rosalind in her banishment. After Duke Frederick and his attendants have taken their leave, Celia and Rosalind decide that they must take on disguise if they are to be safe in their travels. Rosalind explains that she'll be called Ganymede, a name which comes from Greek literature, who was a young man who was considered beautiful and desirable to both men and women. Celia announces that she shall be Eleina, a name which suggests the idea of being lost. Lost, that is, until she finds herself in the forest of Arden. The act concludes with Celia declaring, "Now go we in content to liberty, and not to banishment." Here concludes Act 1 of As You Like It for I Hear Shakespeare. Act 2, Scene 1 introduces us to the banished Duke Signor living the pastoral life in the forest of Arden. He is speaking with his company about how much better life is being, free from peril than the envious court. Some of the other lords present remark how Jaques, known for his melancholy, cried and made such a scene over the death of a deer they shot for food. Jaques is neither content in the royal court nor in the forest of Arden, and so will be the butt of many jokes. Scene 2 takes us back to Duke Frederick's court, where we see that Duke Frederick has been unable to find Celia and Rosalind. Duke Frederick orders that Orlando be arrested, and if he cannot be found, then his brother Oliver is to be brought in for questioning. In Scene 3, we find the kindly servant Adam, warning Orlando to flee, for Duke Frederick intends to do some harm to him. During Adam's speeches, Adam praises Orlando repeatedly and calls him the very memory of old Sir Roland, who is Orlando, Jaques de Bois, and Oliver's father. Incidentally, there are two characters who share the name Jaques. There is Jaques, a lord to Duke Signor, and then there's Jaques de Bois, who is the middle brother to Oliver and Orlando. The scene concludes with Adam volunteering his saved money for Orlando's benefit if Orlando will have Adam along as a serving man. Having struck an accord, the two men set off into the forest of Arden. Scene 4 takes us to Celia and Rosalind, now in disguise, taking a moment to rest as they are weary from traveling. Touchstone is accompanying them, and as they are expressing their exhaustion, two shepherds pass by. Corin, the elderly shepherd, is explaining to the young Silvius how once he was in love. Touchstone calls them over, and Rosalind asks if they will accept money for food. The conversation unfolds that Corin's master wishes to sell his property in Arden. This is just the opportunity Rosalind and Celia are looking for, and so they follow Corin back to his master's house. In Scene 5, we find Amiens singing a song about the virtues of life in the woods. Jaques adds his own verse with the opposing theme of a man becoming foolish enough to shun life in town in favor of life in the woods. A quick Scene 6 depicts Orlando and Adam, who are now weary from their traveling. Adam calls for rest and food. Orlando assists the older man offstage in search of food and shelter. In Scene 7, Duke Signor is about to dine, but first asks the whereabouts of Jaques, who soon enters, exclaiming that he met a fool in the woods who spoke brilliantly about the passing of time. Jaques now longs to be a fool and contemplate deeply and profoundly the meaning of things, so that he may make the world a better place to be. Presently, Orlando appears and, with his sword drawn, demands something to eat. Nonplussed, Duke Signor welcomes Orlando to the table. Somewhat embarrassed by his initial aggression, Orlando admits that he has an elderly companion who needs food as well. Duke Signor likewise invites him too. Orlando exits, and Jaques, newly inspired by his meeting with the fool, extemporizes on the nature of man with his "All the World's a Stage" monologue. Orlando and Adam return, and dinner resumes. Duke Signor calls for Amiens to sing a song, which he does concerning the evil side of man and the merry life in the woods. The scene concludes with Duke Signor understanding that Orlando is Sir Roland de Bois's son, and that Adam was his true servant. Here concludes Act 2 of As You Like It, for I Hear Shakespeare. Act 3, Scene 1, takes us back to Duke Frederick, who stands in disbelief that Oliver does not know the whereabouts of his brother Orlando. Further, Duke Frederick dispossesses Oliver of his wealth and property until he is able to produce Orlando. Oliver has 12 months to find Orlando or face banishment himself. Scene 2 shows Orlando hanging love poems upon trees, all dedicated to Rosalind. Next, we find Touchstone catechizing the rustic Corin about philosophy. Touchstone's comments are cleverly constructed, while Corin's demonstrate the practical nature of a rural life. Next, we see Rosalind enter dressed as Ganymede, reading aloud a poem left by Orlando. Touchstone recounts the poem in parody. Celia next enters dressed as Eleina, with yet another poem written by Orlando to Rosalind, celebrating his love for her. Celia sends Corin and Touchstone away, and further reveals that she has seen Orlando sleeping nearby. As Orlando and Jaques appear, Rosalind and Celia hide in order to overhear their conference. Jaques and Orlando artfully insult each other's words and actions until they can bear one another's company no longer. Jaques exits, and Rosalind appears before Orlando, and since she is dressed as Ganymede, he does not recognize her. Orlando admits that he is in love with Rosalind. Rosalind savors the misperception on Orlando's part, and even goes so far as to get him to demonstrate how he will woo his Rosalind by using her, who Orlando thinks is a man, in the role of Rosalind. Orlando offers words of love and devotion, which Rosalind amends and clarifies. Taken by Ganymede's insights, Orlando agrees to meet with him for further instruction. Ganymede insists that Orlando call him Rosalind. Later, in Scene 3, we find Touchstone the Clown wooing a country girl named Audrey as Jaques eavesdrops. After Audrey decrees, "I am not a slut, though I thank the gods I am foul," Touchstone decides he will marry her. Presently, the country parson Sir Oliver Martext enters, and Touchstone requests that he and Audrey be married immediately. Always ready to muddy a good time, Jaques comes out of hiding and protests to their hasty marriage and escorts the two away. Scene 4 finds Rosalind stressed that Orlando is late for his appointment with Ganymede. Celia suggests that men are not known for their punctuality, but gives assurance that Orlando couldn't have gone far since he attends to Rosalind's father, Duke Signor. Rosalind seems disinterested in reuniting with her father, only with re-encountering Orlando. Corin next arrives and implores them to come see the courtship of Phoebe and Silvius. Next, in Scene 5, Rosalind, dressed as Ganymede, has arrived with Celia and Corin to hear how Phoebe is denying Silvius her love. Rosalind reprimands Phoebe for dismissing a worthy lover, and Phoebe swoons over Ganymede, whom she thinks is a man. Rosalind advises Phoebe to be nicer to Silvius, and then takes her leave with Celia and Corin. Phoebe takes that advice and becomes gentler toward Silvius. Phoebe next reflects on her encounter with Ganymede and decides she'll write him a taunting letter, which Silvius must deliver. Here concludes Act 3 of As You Like It, for I Hear Shakespeare. Act 4, Scene 1 finds Jaques trying to acquaint himself better with Rosalind as Ganymede. Rosalind is not interested in Jaques because, while he has traveled much and gained experience, he is none the wiser and remains an ascetic. Jaques is dismissed and Orlando appears and is immediately berated by Rosalind, dressed as Ganymede, for his tardiness. Rosalind once more teases Orlando about his views on love and commitment, and then has Celia conduct a mock wedding. Orlando finally says that he must depart, for Duke Signor is expecting him. Orlando bids adieu, and Rosalind admits that she loves Orlando all the more. A very brief Scene 2 takes us back to Jaques, who, with some other lords, sings a song in celebration of the deer that has just been killed. Scene 3 begins with Rosalind complaining to Celia that Orlando is late yet again. Silvius enters with Phoebe's letter written to Ganymede, which Rosalind mocks. Rosalind next insists that Silvius return to Phoebe and tell her that if she loves Ganymede, then she, Phoebe, must agree to love Silvius. Silvius exits as Oliver enters. After confirming that Rosalind is the Ganymede that Orlando spoke of, Oliver produces a blood-stained napkin delivered from Orlando. Oliver next relays the story of how he was almost killed while sleeping by a lioness, but Orlando, knowing who Oliver was, saved him by putting himself between the lioness and Oliver. Orlando killed the lioness but suffered a wound evidenced by the blood-stained napkin, which he asked Oliver to deliver to Ganymede as proof to excuse Orlando's tardiness. Oliver further confesses that, due to his youngest brother's actions, he has had a change of heart and has turned from his evil ways. Ganymede faints, and Oliver senses that there is something peculiar about this man who has such a soft stomach. Ganymede recovers and demands that Oliver convey to Orlando that the faint was just pretend. Here concludes Act 4 of As You Like It, for I Hear Shakespeare. Scene 1 of Act 5 finds Touchstone and Audrey still trying to find a time and place to be married when a former suitor, William, arrives claiming that he too loves Audrey. Touchstone tests William's wit and then tells William to go away or he, Touchstone, will kill him. William exits. Corin next enters and calls the pair away. Scene 2 takes us to Oliver, who is confessing to Orlando his love for Celia, who currently goes by the name Eleina. Since Eleina returns Oliver's love, Orlando offers his consent and the two are set to be married the next day. Rosalind, dressed as Ganymede, enters. Seeing Oliver departing, Rosalind says, "God save you, brother," to which Oliver replies, "And you, fair sister." And so we can be confident that Oliver knows Rosalind's game, and if Oliver knows, then Orlando must at least suspect. Rosalind asks about Orlando's wounds. Orlando says that his heart is more wounded by a lady than by a lion. Orlando shares with Rosalind that Oliver and Celia are to be married tomorrow. Orlando seems weary of waiting for Rosalind to appear, at which Rosalind assures Orlando that, by some magic she has learned, is able to produce Rosalind at the same time as Celia is to be married to Oliver, and then there can be yet another wedding. Next, Silvius and Phoebe enter, and Rosalind, as Ganymede, states that if she should marry any woman, then Ganymede will marry Phoebe. But if Phoebe sees that Ganymede will not marry any woman, then Phoebe must accept Silvius. Phoebe gives consent. Scene 3 begins with Touchstone announcing to Audrey that they will be married tomorrow, and so we now have 3 confirmed and 1 pending marriage set for the next day. Those are Celia to Oliver, Touchstone to Audrey, Rosalind to Orlando, and pending is Phoebe to Silvius, but at this point you can guess what happens. Next, 2 pages enter and sing a merry love song. Scene 4 begins with Duke Signor and Orlando discussing the credibility of Ganymede as magician. Rosalind enters and recounts the bargain struck earlier with Orlando, Phoebe, and Silvius, and also reminds Duke Signor that he must look favorably upon the match of his daughter, Rosalind, with Orlando. Everyone agrees that that is the bargain, and Rosalind exits with Celia to prepare for her grand entrance. Touchstone enters and holds a lively rhetorical conversation with Jaques on dueling. Next, Hymen, the god of marriage, enters to conduct the ceremony along with Rosalind, no longer in disguise, accompanied by Celia, who now also goes by her true name. The four couples are married as the middle brother to Oliver and Orlando, Jacques du Bois, makes his entrance. Jacques du Bois explains that Duke Frederick had been building an army to come for Duke Signor and was even at the edge of the forest when he, Duke Frederick, was converted by an old religious man and now wishes to restore Duke Signor to his rightful position along with all other things that should have rightfully gone to him. Everyone rejoices except for the ill-tempered Jacques, who is eager to speak with the newly converted Duke Frederick. The play concludes with Rosalind speaking an epilogue. Within it, Rosalind transitions from the character of Rosalind into the young boy actor who would have played that role in Elizabethan England. Today, this moment is handled differently since the actor playing Rosalind, one of the most exciting roles in the Shakespearean canon for female performers, is likely a woman. Here concludes Act 5 of As You Like It for I Hear Shakespeare.